Arsenal got off to a winning start to the new Premier League season yesterday, 2-0 against Wolves, and they could strengthen yet. They're getting closer to signing the Real Sociedad midfielder Mikel Merino after he was left out of their squad for tonight's La Liga game against Rayo Vallecano. Now, the Sociedad manager, Imanol Alguacil, says the player is currently in talks with other clubs after entering the final year of his contract there. Arsenal are negotiating with Sociedad over a deal for Merino, and Mikel Arteta, the boss, is really keen to add another midfielder to his squad this summer.
Well, hello everyone. How has your summer been without a dose of the Gary Neville podcast, which returns from a beautiful sunny Stamford Bridge towards the end, not quite the end of the first weekend of the Premier League season. Gary, perhaps we start with an overview. What have you thought of what you've seen?
Well, no surprises or shocks really so far. I think Brighton stands out a little bit just for the emphatic victory at Goodison Park, but they're a good side. But United have won, Liverpool have won, City have won, Arsenal have won, Newcastle have won. I'm trying to think who else. Villa have won, and obviously Tottenham play tomorrow night. So all the teams that are sort of near the top. I might have missed someone out there. Apologies if I did, but nothing spectacular, no big shocks. Quite solid. Usually after a tournament, I always think that it might just be a little bit slow getting into things, and the other teams that haven't got as many international players might have an advantage, but it's not proved to be that way this weekend at all.
No, and in fact, for the big clubs that you mention, actually the wins, and I don't mean this in any sort of derogatory way, they've been functional, haven't they? They've just been teams that seem well rehearsed and able to get a game won.
Yeah, and clean sheets as well for many of them. So I think you're absolutely right. A good solid weekend for the top clubs. We like to see shocks. We like to see the underdogs win sometimes, but it's just not proved to be like that. And I think like City today will be very, very happy. I mean, they've had the toughest fixture by a mile, and actually, you look at the sort of fact they've got no Rodri and they've got the bench full of players who have only come back in midweek. It should have been maybe harder for them today, but they're very, very experienced, this City team, and sort of 2-3 months away from them, you sort of forget how good they are, and the fact that they've got a great squad. You know, they've lost Gundogan, Mahrez, Alvarez, and you think, oh, maybe they're deteriorating, there's a bit of decay, they're aging a little bit, and all of a sudden they just remind you of what they are, which is an excellent team.
And perhaps we mentioned this towards the end of the game, maybe the key thing around last weekend at Wembley and here is that they immediately answer that question, which people naturally ask around hunger, around incentive, around whether they are prepared to go and do it all over again, and clearly they are.
Yeah, I mean, the two things in the last 20 minutes that were real standout was their ability to control and manage the game, but that's something that they do, so it didn't surprise us. But the work ethic of Doku and Foden, I always think if you've got a top side, I thought Nico Williams and Yamal in the tournament for Spain, we all talked about how exciting they were going forward, but if you watch how quickly when the team lost the ball, they got back in and attached themselves to their defensive players, their fullbacks and the midfield players, I always think that's the sign of a really top side. Now, that's because you're watching some of the best players in the world do the ugly part of the game, and we shouldn't take that for granted, because there's quite often teams and players who think that they shouldn't be doing that part of the game, that they're too good and they swan around a little bit. But you watch Foden and Doku, and you watch the boy Savinho in the first half, you watch De Bruyne sprinting back at 2-0 with I think 91 minutes on the clock. These are some of the best players in Europe and the world, and they're doing that part of the game, and that's the thing that I always look for in a top team. And you look at Manchester City, they don't lose their hunger, we can't question them for that. It's the least they should give, but still it's impressive year on year. They never, they've climbed that mountain now the last 4 seasons, and they've not got to the top of that mountain and gone, we've done it. They've got to the top of the mountain, they've got back down in the summer, and then they're ready to climb back up it again, and it's something that's admirable. You know, I thought last season off the back of a treble it would be one season too many for them, particularly with Arsenal's progression, but Arsenal watching that this afternoon will recognise, if they didn't already of course they would have done, that they've got a hell of a fight on again.
And just perhaps a slightly longer mention of the guy you just mentioned, Savinho, sadly hurt, hopefully not badly hurt. He's the one who's climbing the mountain for the first time. What are your impressions?
Oh, he was lovely for about 15-20 minutes before half-time. He took Cucurella on down our side here, just in this corner, and he just drifted past him. I'm still asking that question that I'm going to ask after 15 minutes. Why can't a left-footed player play on the left anymore? Why can't a right-footed player play on the right? I mean, Doku switched. He had a good battle with Cucurella down this side, but Cucurella was winning it. And then he just switched, and all of a sudden he looked better, and Savinho looked better. But it mesmerises me, because I've played football for 15 years where, you know, a lot of players with left foots played on the left, a lot of players with right foot played on the right, and it's just something that's completely and utterly changed, where now it looks odd and obscure and actually awkward sometimes watching a player play on the left with the left foot or right with the right foot. So yeah, once they got onto their other sides, on the right sides for them, they looked brilliant, both of them. Doku was fantastic in the second half. Savinho looked like a lovely, just sort of the way in which he carried the ball was smooth, a little bit of a Mahrez about him, sort of them players that are quick but don't look quick and always look like they're in control and graceful. Hopefully he's not too bad with his injury, because he looked really promising.
And from Chelsea's perspective, obviously they're such a massively debated club, and some laugh at the massive squad. The positive read on that, as we were saying again in the game, is that they've got good players in every position. So where are you with this sort of complicated equation that is Chelsea?
I think it is quite complicated and complex. I do believe there is a nucleus there of very good young players with a good average age. There's some things that happen at Chelsea that are slightly obscure and bizarre, the sort of long-term contracts that to this day no one can tell me why the owners here think that it's the right strategy and why that everyone else in the game doesn't do it. That's the question I'm asking. What do they know that everyone else in the game doesn't know about the sort of, if you like, length of contracts? Because you can control a player's contract on 5 or 6 years. I don't think you need to offer 8 and 9. I know there's a financial engineering element to it as well. But look, they've changed manager again. They've got to give that manager time. I think the reason they've done that is they want this very clear identity and style of play. Maresca is one of the disciples of Pep Guardiola. He's got quite a lot of them now. It's almost like Gordon Ramsay producing the Michelin star chefs that he's done over the years, and Pep Guardiola is producing Michelin star coaches. And obviously another one at the top of the league, Mikel Arteta, where he's having such an influence over them. But it is going to take time, and there is going to be some pain, because I think he had to back off a bit today, Maresca. It'll be interesting to see what he says post-match. But the demands that he put on his players at Leicester, in how to play, and some of the demands he put on his players in pre-season, he didn't put them on this game today. I think in terms of playing out from the back, they were a bit more basic and safe and cautious. Maybe that was because he knows Pep, he knows the quality of City, he knows the quality of how they press, and he thought, well, no, I just need to make sure that I'm a bit more safe today. But it meant that at times I felt they were stuck in between a little bit of a team that was sort of half in, half out, and they lacked a little bit of real belief. I think after today, Maresca will just go back to the sort of real fluid football. And just interestingly, in that first half, I don't know if you heard it, there were a few, I won't say boos from Chelsea fans, but sighs when they were trying to play out from the back. And that needs to probably go. He probably needs to educate the fans, and so do the club, because I think that he is going to play that way. That's why they've signed Maresca as a coach, is because they want to really play out and get these young players, popping it about and buzzing. They've got a balance issue, I think, in midfield. I thought Lavia was actually a positive, but where Enzo Fernandez plays in that number 10 role, I get the feeling that he's not a natural number 10, someone who sort of really understands the position. He can play in there, but he's not really at his best in there. I feel like he's someone who's better arriving onto the ball and running forward rather than being already in there. So there are things to do, but I wouldn't get carried away one way or the other. I won't be overly negative about Chelsea today because of what I've seen. They're playing against the top side. I actually thought when City were controlling the game with 20 minutes to go and they kept the discipline and the shape, was the right way to go about it. Far too many times you see a team 1-0 against City down, go too early and sprint out at them, and then they'll go and do you in 2-0. They got the 2-0. The goalkeeper was a disappointment. And I always fear that when obviously someone gets signed, like Jorgensen's been signed, hasn't he? And you think he's probably looking over his shoulder, worried to death a little bit. And maybe we saw that with Sanchez today, because he did look a little nervy, but not too much, I think, for Chelsea to be concerned about today. I think obviously the sort of bigger fights down the road.
Okay, well let's rattle around the other big boys. Arsenal weren't live on the telly, but we saw bits and pieces of them. By all accounts, they were very, very good.
Yeah.
And of course, Jurrien Timber got on the field as well, which is massive for them.
Yeah, he came on, didn't he? And I watched the highlights of it, and Saka looked fantastic. Havertz obviously getting his goal and the little header, which was a good one as well. So it was a solid day for Arsenal. I mean, Arsenal are a very good team now, and they're at a point whereby they don't need to make big changes in the squad. They just need little additions. So yeah, if they can keep their players fit, which I think last season Arsenal, City, I think Fulham used the sort of least amount of players, if you like, which is a real strength. which I think Chelsea are going to have to get to here with the number of players they've got. But I think going back to Arsenal, they're in a good place. I think Mikel Arteta has got a really good sort of understanding. He's got a strength of position. Even though the trophies haven't been coming the last few years, you can see real progression, massive points tally last year. And I think they'll have a really good season. Their problem, and everyone's problem, is the quality of Pep Guardiola and Manchester City and what they'll have to do to beat them and get over the line.
Before we do Liverpool, who are next, just to mention for Ipswich, just because personally I can't wait to get there. You know, that the sense.
It'll take you forever. You better set off.
Well,
now.
I live closer than you do. Yeah, but the sense of occasion there was a really, really beautiful thing. It's a smashing club, you know, and they. Listen, they don't want to be patronised, but they did put on a show.
Yeah.
They were the match of Liverpool for an hour or so.
Yeah.
How did you read all of that?
Yeah, the match of Liverpool for an hour. They obviously had a couple of moments which you've got to take one if you're going to do anything against the big boys, and then all of a sudden you find out that quality. It just came down that right-hand side with Trent Alexander-Arnold and Salah, I felt. And the boy at left-back, I forgot his name now.
Leif Davis.
Leif Davis, yeah, sorry. And he just, you know, he found out about the Premier League, but you're playing against, I was saying to one of the Sky producers for Monday Night Football earlier on today about the amount of times that Salah and Trent Alexander-Arnold have played together now over hundreds of games, it must be. The amount of success they've had down that right-hand side attacking with Trent's passing and Salah's movement, and, you know, you just saw some real quality that last goal where obviously he played it inside him, and it's just something that you're going to face. You're going to face teams that don't have to be at the best but can deliver in moments and can deliver world-class moments through world-class players, and that's what Ipswich found yesterday. And Liverpool were better in the second half. I thought Arne Slot was quite tough on Kwanzaa.
Well, Kwanzaa and Konate,
yeah.
I mean, that's a big call, isn't it?
Well,
I mean, personally it is. If you're Jarell Kwanzaa, it feels like a big call.
It is. I mean, subbing someone at half-time is big, and I don't think it's done lightly by managers. It was the way in which after the game as well, he was quite blunt about how he answered it. There was no holding back. So I think there's an element there of, you know, him being quite sort of clinical and brutal and saying, look, you know, he's reacted to the game and what was happening. Felt like they needed to win the duels. I think that was his main thread behind the decision. And it worked. You've got to say, in the second half, Liverpool were a lot better, and it was a good win for them.
Which leaves Manchester United, who you dealt with. It doesn't just leave Manchester United. People will be screaming at me. There's plenty of others. But of those clubs that, you know, the big high-profile clubs, you dealt with United a lot on Friday night. Do you have more to say on them?
No, not too much, no. I mean, on reflection, I think it's the same story. Winning was very important. I think still finding that balance in the team, getting the players back, trying to keep the same. You know, they changed the centre-back pairing again during the game, which is just a little bit of a worry. You know, Eric Ten Hag said that Harry Maguire, it was precautionary, it wasn't an injury, but it's just something they have to monitor. I think they have to try and keep the players fit. I don't think we can be sat here in October where, you know, Eric Ten Hag is talking about excuses of injuries, because that can't happen this year. You know, if you have injuries in one season, it can be deemed unlucky. If you have injuries in the second season, that's not unlucky. It's a pattern. It's what you are. It's your recruitment. It's your training. It's your preparation. It's your medical department. It's your sports sciences. All those things come into question when you get repetitive injuries. So they've got to deal with that and make sure they get the players out on the pitch, and the players as well. I mean, no player gets injured on a purpose. So it's usually through a stress or some sort of what would be fault that they have within their system and body that, you know, has been probably coming for a number of years, and they have some players like that. So I think with United, a long way to go for all the teams, but it was a good start for them. The boys Urzi coming on was a big bonus that for him to come on, because they played without a centre forward for much of that game.
Yeah, and of those disruptors, if you like, of the traditional big ones, Newcastle, Villa are the two we think of.
Yeah.
Villa kind of have the problem this year that Newcastle had last, of staying in the top four and playing in the Champions League. I thought they were really good at West Ham. And of course, Newcastle have won a game with 10 men, which is never an easy thing to do.
No, very good for Newcastle with what happened, obviously, and I think for Villa they look very good. And you're right, there's no point in judging Villa at this point in time. They've got a very experienced manager who's been around the block and knows this game about playing in Europe and playing obviously at the weekend as well. So it's not new for Villa at all, or for Unai Emery, but the Champions League brings such a sense of occasion and it's like an event. For playing in the Champions League, even for teams that have played in it quite a few times, that music comes on, and for Villa, their fans, it will feel like a massive event, but then you've got to go to Ipswich away at 12:30 on a Saturday after it, And that's where you've got to sort of like, you'll have played maybe away somewhere, you've come back at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday, you get back, you feel a little bit like you're hungover even though you've not had a drink. That's how you do feel in Europe sometimes. It's like when you travel, that's how we all feel. Players are the same, and then they get up on a Friday morning and they feel just well behind it, and then they've got to go and play again. And that's why the top clubs, the top players, the top teams, they do it year in, year out, and they just repeat that, and they're very good at it. It's new for Villa, so it comes with that heightened anxiety and expectation and sort of electricity that it'll bring, but it'll sap them of a little bit of energy, and they've just got to deal with that, and they've got a very good manager to be able to do so.
And Forest and Bournemouth drew, and listen, you wouldn't be forgiven if you didn't note that Brighton are top of the league. So a word for Brighton people.
Yeah, exciting. Obviously Brighton, they've obviously got a new manager as well, very young manager, and the two wide players are exciting. You see Danny Welbeck, I was delighted for him, because I always am, because I think he's a fantastic player. I really do. I think he's had a great career. And also a good weekend for the referees. There was a tough one earlier on today, wasn't there, at Brentford? But generally, I think it's been a good start for the referees, which I think was important. We didn't need controversy, sort of in bundles, did we, this weekend? We just needed a solid start for everybody. So I think most people that can get wound up in this game are probably calm at this moment in time. Even me, even I'm smiling. I still feel like I'm on holiday.
Fantastic. So just finally, give us a quick tease. Monday Night Football.
Monday Night Football tomorrow, yes. Leicester versus Tottenham. I'm in the studio. I do the first one of the season, and probably the last actually as well, right at the end when we do the predictions. Speaking earlier on today, I think we'll cover today's game, I'm sure. I think Brighton will probably get a mention. Leicester and Tottenham, of course, obviously, in terms of what's going to happen. A big change for Leicester from the coaching principles that they've got now to what they had last season. There'll be a touch on Liverpool because Carragher's doing it, and there always is. And I don't think we'll do Manchester United because obviously we covered it on Friday night. So I think that's pretty much going to be it. I wanted to, if I was doing a bit on Liverpool actually, I wanted to look at that sort of idea of the partnership of Trent Alexander-Arnold and Salah down that right-hand side. I can't think of many more sort of players who've played together on one side of the pitch over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And obviously there will be some, obviously, but City's wingers have changed repeatedly, and Robertson had Mane on that side for a few years, but he left a couple of years ago. So, back in the day, it used to be a big thing about partnerships down the side of the pitch.
You know that.
Yeah.
You had one of the most famous.
Yeah, and it's really important, that familiarity and that sort of consistency of play. So maybe touch on that slightly. I think Mo Salah yesterday broke a record, I was told,
yeah,
this
for
morning.
most goals on the opening day.
Most goals on the opening day. And he also, has he played 300?
350, was it?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah,
ridiculous amount.
Crazy,
or goals and assists.
Oh,
300 goals and assists, something like that, which is a monstrous amount of goals and assists. And he looks fresh with his new haircut as well.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thank
Lovely,
you.
Gary.
Well
Welcome
done.
back. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Real Sociedad boss sends strong message about Mikel Merino as Arsenal awaits transfer update. In the latest Arsenal transfer news, midfield target Mikel Merino was notably absent from Real Sociedad's squad for their La Liga opener. Despite ongoing rumors, Real Sociedad manager Imanol Alguacil insists that Merino remains committed to the club until the end, even amid speculation linking him to a move to Arsenal. The Gunners have been steadily strengthening Mikel Arteta's squad this summer, with the additions of Ricardo Calafiori and David Raya. As the Premier League season kicks off, reports from Spain suggest that Merino is hours away from securing a transfer to the Emirates Stadium. Arsenal is expected to pay between £25 million and £30 million for the former Newcastle United player, who has 1 year left on his contract. His involvement in Spain's victorious Euro 2024 campaign, coupled with this ongoing transfer saga, has kept him out of pre-season action. Alguacil confirmed that Merino would not feature in the match against Rayo Vallecano, which was expected and confirmed this afternoon. Additionally, former Arsenal target Martin Zubimendi, who recently turned down a move to Liverpool, was only named as a substitute. When pressed for further clarification today, Alguacil responded, "Both players are here, one isn't on the list, and the other is on the bench. They still belong to Real Sociedad, and they'll be with the team until the end. Nothing has changed, I said this yesterday. Those who are here will do everything to win the game. We'll see who's available for the next one." Earlier this week, Mikel Arteta was asked about transfer updates, but he remained tight-lipped about his primary midfield target. He stated, I can't talk about any other players. After last season, I said we had two main objectives. The first and most important is to ensure we remain passionate about our players and find ways to improve them. That's our priority. Then, if certain opportunities arise in the market to enhance the squad, we will certainly look at them. That's what we'll try to do.